Hi, I'm David from Vertex Holdings, and I'm excited to have with me today Pierre Garnier, Managing Partner at Jolt Capital, to speak on trends in the semiconductor industry. Now, Pierre comes with over 30 years of experience in the semiconductor space, with experience across large corporations and startups. Prior to joining Jolt Capital, Pierre was also the president at E2V Semiconductor, a leading innovator of semiconductor devices. Now, Pierre, great to have you here with us today. Now, we've seen a lot happening up to 2022. We see 5G, AI, electric vehicles, soaring demand for chips. At the same time, we witness a global chip shortage. Now, my first question is this: what trends are you seeing in the semiconductor space from both a VC funding angle and also an innovation perspective?
Well, thanks, David, and a great question to start with. The key trend that I see first on the funding on the VC in the semiconductor space, we see a real rebound on interest from the VC community to invest globally in deep tech and more specifically in semiconductors. And I think this came with both, I would say, some effect of the pandemic that we got, which created some supply chain issues that we have all lived with worldwide, but also with more recent, Ukrainian crisis, where we see that mastering some control point within the value chain in electronics industry globally is something which is serious. And in that case, obviously, semiconductor plays a critical role. In terms of innovation, this is a super active domain, obviously. And I think that I may see, innovation happening in few different fields. The first one, this is really looking at having more processing power, more bandwidth, and implementing, what we have been heard as the More than Moore laws. The Moore's law, which has been applied for the last, few decades, is still going on in a certain extent, but only for a part of the semiconductor business. The More than Moore, this is a way to be able to combine different technology nodes and capabilities of the semiconductors, like pure digital or analog or sensors, on the same package, not only to reduce the space for small, tiny consumer electronics devices, but also to optimize power consumptions and bandwidth of the interaction between memory and processor, as an example. So here, advanced packaging, 3D ICs, high bandwidth memories is really a field where we see a lot of innovation coming in. Second element, this is definitively everything which is linked to compound semiconductor or wide band gap, because you don't go for fun in compound semiconductor versus a pure silicon one, because this is more difficult to process, this is more difficult to get the right yield. But when you need the performance, this is definitively where you have to go. And we see that either in high frequency RF products, we see that in integrated photonics, and we see that in power conversion efficiencies.
What industries are driving the growth of the global semiconductor market?
One, this is a very high data computing, big data, data centers, AI, computing engine, and all that. And this is driving both the sub-nanometers, big 5 nano, 3 nano, and all that, but a lot in this advanced packaging, high bandwidth memories, and also something which I should mention, which is very important, and I think this is something that will drive a lot of growth in the next few years. This is all the chiplet concept. In the semiconductor, 20 years ago, every time you do a new chip, you start it from scratch, and then we move to the IP concept, IP blocks within the same system on chip. But then we are extending, the industry is extending this concept at few dies on the same package with interposer, to make sure that you can, again, get the best of each technology for each function within the electronic systems. And this is something which is really driving that.
Now, which geographies are we seeing the most innovation or funding, and what are some growth areas that we should look out for?
If I start with the VC funding perspective, US is still the continent where I see the biggest investment in new technologies and new in new, I would say, startups and VCs and early stage and all that. Definitely, this is where I think I see the biggest. Still, this is the biggest chunk of it. In Asia, I think we have to differentiate China and the rest of Asia. China is making huge investments, but not that much in VC funding and innovation in startup. They are more massively investing in scaling capabilities on not the most advanced technology nodes. So this is a different angle. The rest of Asia is super active in the investment. Southeast Asia. I should say that unfortunately in Europe, where I'm coming from, we are still, the last guy in the classroom in terms of, I would say, real momentum in the semiconductor investment. Even if it has been a real wake-up call at European level for the last, let's say 12 months. We have the European Chip Act, which has been pushed by the European community. But today, we are lacking enough PE fund and VC funds active in this field.
Now, which subsectors, whether it be chips, wearables, system on a chip, do you think will receive the most VC funding? And from your perspective, why?
There is one category that I will call, the advanced processing and the advanced materials. In terms of product, I think there is some trends that I see which are quite interesting. AI in the edge and edge computing is definitely an area where it does not require massive capital investment, but in terms of chip and product designs, but you can do something which is smart enough to make that happen. Embedded FPGAs and chiplet is also, I think, a very interesting field of investment, which is quite attractive. And globally, I would say sensors. Because again, developing a sensors and when you have analog capabilities in a design using an existing process is something where you can really differentiate.
Now, growth of AI, soaring demand for electric vehicles has led to the growth of startups developing the next gen of wideband semiconductors, such as silicon carbide, gallium nitride, particularly in the power electronics space. Now, in your opinion, for these startups developing the next generation of semiconductors, what do you think is a winning hand?
And at the end of the day, successful semiconductor companies are companies which can design processes and product which can have a good yield. If I have to summarize the global semiconductor industry, if you have a good yield, you have good margin and you are making money. If you have a bad yield, you are losing money and you are going to death. That's a little bit of the two extreme, but this is really what is key. But again, solid yield, mastering the yield, and being able to measure it and qualify it is something which I think will be super critical.
Thanks, Pierre, for sharing all that valuable insight on the semiconductor industry. Definitely an interesting and vital space to watch out for, even as 5G, AI, and electric vehicles become a lot more important in the world of today. To all our viewers, thank you for tuning in to our interview with Pierre Garnier, Managing Partner of Jolt Capital, as he shared his insights on the semiconductor industry. For more trends and investment insights, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Vertex Holdings. Thank you for watching.